selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's dearth, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth.
This is the book where Swamiji, as directed by Yoganandaji, wrote commentary on both the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Ego is a way station on the soul's journey toward enlightenment. The soul is first trapped in lower bodily forms. Slowly it evolves to the human level, at which point self-consciousness appears. Only in human form can self-consciousness transcend material form altogether, including the lower identity of ego consciousness, and discover the true self, divine self within. Self-consciousness, manifested as ego, is an incentive to deliberate self-development. Later in this process of development, however, the ego becomes an obstruction. Inevitably, new spiritual aspirants do not emerge effortlessly from the vortex of ego consciousness. Desire must be offered up resolutely and ever more wholeheartedly on the altar of infinity. It is a gradual process, and few even among those who seek to help others are free of ego. If, however, their motive in teaching is not to serve but to be served, they deserve a severe reprimand. For their direction of development is no longer upward but downward. In the name of giving up desires, they are creating new ones. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. Their relentless foe it is, a flame never quenched. Intellect, mind, and senses, these combined are referred to as the seat of desire. Desire through them deludes and eclipses the discrimination of the embodied soul. O Arjuna, discipline your senses, and having done so, work to destroy desire, annihilator of wisdom and of self-realization. And the Bible commentary is, Jesus Christ said in chapter 10 of the Gospel of St. John, "All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them." Many Christians, not surprisingly, quote this saying in condemnation of other spiritual teachers, not only the Old Testament prophets, but also Buddha, Krishna, and others who lived before Jesus, as well as, by inference, any who came after him. Yet Jesus himself said in St. Matthew chapter 5, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Nowhere do we find Jesus condemning or even gently criticizing other spiritual masters. His criticisms were reserved for worldly attitudes and for those hypocritical Pharisees who had allowed religion to become for them a pretense. Paramahansa Yogananda explained that the expression, "all that ever came before me," referred to those spiritual teachers who placed their egos and their self-importance ahead of the Christ consciousness in the sense of drawing people's devotion to themselves and not offering it where alone it truly belongs, to God. Yogananda himself was very firm in this regard. For example, he never spoke of anyone as his disciple. Instead, he always insisted, "These are God's disciples. God is the guru, not I." Give God the credit for everything you do. See him as the true doer. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om.
for us to contemplate in this reading today. And as you know, we're also having a discipleship ceremony right afterwards, and so these things go together quite well. We reach a point in our journey in life where we realize that we need help. And that's really where the Guru comes in. And so for myself, I had been seeking truth my whole life. I didn't really know that that's what it was that I was seeking. If I had called it truth, I want to know what the ultimate truth is, it would have helped me. But what I did know was I wanted to know what sort of lines of behavior would lead me to happiness, and what sort of actions were correct in that, leading to that goal, and then what wasn't. And so I would discover certain laws of life. Like at a certain point I discovered that it's helpful to listen to other people without giving advice. This was a shock to me at first, because why bring up a problem if you don't want a solution? And I have plenty, so I thought. And it reminds me of something I read. Someone said, right before you have children, go around to all your friends who have children already and give them all the advice on how to raise their children, because this is the last time you will have all the answers. Meaning, as soon as you get your own children, you'll realize how completely difficult it is. There was a couple who had, this was in America, they had 3 girls, and they were just absolute angels. And people had told them, gosh, you've done such a good job in raising these kids. You should give seminars on parenting. You should teach people how to raise children because of what you've done. And so they said it's not a bad idea. And so they went around doing this and giving these classes. Then they had a 4th child, a boy, and his first word was no. And his first full sentence was, do it yourself. And so they realized that this guy was completely a wild man. And no matter what they did, and compared to these just neat little girls before, this guy was, he didn't quite fit, and they couldn't get anything across to him. So they had to abandon their seminars and just say, look, we don't know. We don't know. And so in this way, too, we can think we have all the answers about life. Then we get walloped a few times, and then we say, okay, I don't have all the answers, because if I did, this wouldn't have happened. I would have seen it coming, or I would not have walked right into that trap. And so whenever we walk into these traps, it's encouraging, because, I have discovered a blind spot. I have discovered something that I need to learn, because I didn't see this coming. This is what's helpful about those life experiences that throw us for a loop. And so this is what happened to me. I learned enough to realize I didn't know anything, and that there was a much higher goal, that to be happy needed more than I could see with my own experience thus far. But I had thought, you just learn about life by accident. Maybe you have an experience, maybe you draw the right conclusions from it, but there's no place where you can learn these things. I mean, mathematics you can learn, and science you can learn, but how to live your life, who teaches that? Whatever exposure I had had to religion was not, shall we say, gratifying or enticing. And so I did not think of that as a subject that would help me with anything. Yet, even when I was in college, I was trying to find some framework for living. And so for my final exam essay in cultural anthropology, I selected as my theme that science, science is the new religion. So we had studied all these different cultures, and so I had concluded that we had learned all about their religious beliefs, and I was surprised to see how they had all independently, separated in space and time, evolved some notion of the divine, and so that there must be some higher power. So isn't that interesting that mankind comes up with this? But These days it is science that tells us our place in the universe, how things operate, why, and so on. Although science actually doesn't say why. It says what and how, but never why. And so I got that wrong. And then I decided to compare, look at this one French writer who was one of the first anthropologists. And so I went through all these things, and I was trying to make my point. And then at the end of the essay, which was also at the end of the night, the day before it was due, and so I was in a bit of a bind, I realized that my premise was wrong. Because even I, without religion and loving science, had to admit that science never inspired people to act, never inspired people to change their lives the way religion has. And that it is religion that has moved a whole nation, that has moved individual people and made great changes that way, and that science hasn't. It's just fascinating to know E equals mc squared and pass the Vada. It's just, great, but it doesn't necessarily grip people's hearts. So I had to say, and so my essay is wrong. And but anyway, the professor was pleased enough that I had written enough pages that he said, okay, go ahead, fine, and passed me. But that's when I realized there must be something more to it. That plus a lot of suffering that I didn't see coming made me realize I need help. And so that's the state that we reach when we say, I need someone to help me. I know that I can't get out on my own. Why? Because I've been trying all this time, and I end up back in circles. And so that's when we put out a sincere call. It doesn't have to be that way that I'm describing, but if not in this incarnation, then in another. As Yoganandaji said, the disciple must have prayed very hard in this life and in previous lifetimes to have attracted the help of a true guru. Now remember, it isn't as if the guru is sitting there saying, you may attract my help if you pray hard enough. We'll see. It isn't that. It isn't that he only pays attention once you have shown yourself worthy. He pays attention once you have shown yourself ready. And ready does not mean qualified. That, you have your resume, you have your certification, you have your ISO 9001. That's not what ready means. Ready means, I want help. That's enough. If you say, I want help, then the guru can come. Because that's how we open ourselves. The guru never imposes. And as I've said before, sometimes we wish he would. Master, can you just knock me on the head and stop me from making this same dumb mistake? Can you just do it? And he says, no, because even if I did, it wouldn't give you the strength that you need. After all, he's only here to train us to become stronger, to train us to become wiser and clearer. And so we have to come to that ourselves. He's not going to take our calculus exam for us and just fill in the answers. 4/3 pi r cubed. Oh, thanks. So we just write it down. Although sometimes he does do things like that. But in terms of developing our own strength, we really have to do it ourselves. With his help. I don't mean alone at all. But he can't just, we have to build our own muscles. He's not going to inject anything into us to just suddenly make us strong lumps. We have to develop through our own effort, because that is according to our own desire. Now the reading spoke against desire, and I agree. But there is that one desire, the one desire that we need is the desire for God. And as one great master said, desires are like thorns that are stuck in our flesh, but the desire for God is like another thorn that you can use to remove these first thorns that are all stuck, and then you can throw all the thorns away. So that desire for God leads us out of all the other desires. And remember the karmic law. As soon as we have a strong enough desire, it must be fulfilled. It must be granted. And so, that applies too to the desire for God. When we have a strong enough desire for God, it generates a strong enough karma that must be fulfilled in time. So as soon as we have that desire for God strongly, we can count ourselves blessed. That now I know it's coming. I don't know the date, I don't know the time, but I know He is coming. Remember Master's words, it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. So when we feel we're not making it in our efforts, when we feel like we're not holding up to whatever standard we think we should have, remember you have very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. I say that also knowing all of you. And so, the reason I just gave that caveat is because I remembered Swamiji said once in a public lecture, you all, he said, the Master's quote, a very, very, very good karma. And he said, and you all, coming to this lecture today, have very good karma. I won't say very, very, but very. Because it depends on how much are you willing to commit yourself. Again, to your own heart's desire for God. It's not a question of some external standard. These are the pure ones, and these are those who are impure. It is nothing like that. I say that because often that thought is put out, and have none of it. It is just not true. All of us are pure in our natures, and all of us have some impurities to be worked out. As Master said, gold covered in centuries of mud remains gold, and it is never tarnished. And so that gold, pure gold of our soul nature, is divine. No matter what mistakes we may have made, that's just mud to be washed off. And so it reminds me actually of a time when we were leading the center in Noida. And our pattern was basically we would have a satsang, and then there would be, prasad or a light lunch afterwards with everybody, and then we would have the afternoon classes, like here, similar pattern. But what happened was I was very enthusiastically gesturing in the middle of the lunch and turned right as someone had a whole plate of something with tomato sauce. I don't know what it was. And I was in white at that time, and just a perfect oval, covering at least 50% of the torso, bright red. And it was just, oh boy. So I went and I, tried to wash it off. So it basically became bright pink and orange. But that's about as far as I could do. We had forgotten to bring our bleach that day. And so, I'm joking, we wouldn't travel with bleach. But so I wish we had. And so then I had to basically, I didn't have anything to change into. And I had to have the rest of these classes that we were doing together just sort of, hi everyone, pay no attention, or could I sort of be like this, or sort of say, as I was saying. But the class, in fact, was on discipleship. And so I thought, okay, Master, you have a good sense of humor, and you obviously are laughing right now. So how can I share in your joy? And so one thing that occurred to me was I said, look at this, I have this big stain here. And of course I could feel embarrassed about it, but it's just a mark. It has nothing to do with me. When I get home, I'm going to just put it in the laundry and put some bleach in it, and it'll be gone. It is nothing. It's not a part of me at all, and it's easily remedied. So any mistake that we are doing in our lives, or any bad quality that we have, is just the same as this mark. It's just put a little bleach on it, put it in the laundry, get purified, and it's over. Don't identify it as yourself. It isn't you at all. It isn't what you've come for. It isn't what you've given your life for. Identify with the positive. Identify with your goal, where you're going, not where you've come from. As Sri Yukteswarji said, the vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. All men, every single one, every single person. His first statement, forget the past. Forget the past means forget this morning and all things before it. Forget the past. The vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. Human conduct is ever unreliable until anchored in the divine. Don't depend on your own human conduct to be perfect. Depend on God's conduct to say, God, as long as you are with me, I can't go wrong. And don't depend on others' human conduct either. It isn't fair to ask someone who is not self-realized to act self-realized. though we would like it. But we should be looking to ourselves for that, and everyone else is doing their best. Even if they're doing what seems like they're doing their worst, but they're doing their best according to their understanding. So, human conduct is ever unreliable until anchored in the divine. Everything in future will improve if you are making a spiritual effort now. And so ask yourself, am I making a spiritual effort now? And the answer is yes. Not, well, I don't know. The answer is yes. Sometimes we can be too hard on ourselves. Sometimes we can be too soft on ourselves. You have to decide which side of that equation you are on. But in general, when we think we are no good, we are being too hard on ourselves. It's just not true. It takes very, very, very good karma even to meditate 3 hours a day. No, even to want to know God. That is karma on the one hand that you should consider a great blessing because you have yourself put together. You're heading in the right direction. But then on the other hand, it's also what you have developed yourself over lifetimes. So it is you could think of it as some kind of fixed deposit that you have made yourself over lifetime after lifetime that you actually get to benefit from now. That is really what the only thing you take with you is your degree of God consciousness, your degree of soul aspiration. That's what comes with you. You can take it with you. It's all that you take with you. Remember, the tests that we go through, the experiences that we go through, the successes and failures are not important in themselves, but rather in what we become as a result of them. You could live your whole life having constant failure in everything you tried. And if through that you developed great willpower, great perseverance, never mind, I'll just try again, then you could be free in even that lifetime, if not the next lifetime. Interestingly, Master gave one example that can be applied to this, though somewhat tenuously, of a disciple who had betrayed him many times in his current lifetime and in the past lifetime. And that man finally left him in Master's lifetime, and he said to a few others, he will never find God except through this channel, given to him, assigned to him by God. And then he said he will find God in 3 lives. He said he will find him in 3 lives, not he may find him in 3 lives, or if he doesn't blow it again like he did this time. He said he will find God in 3 lifetimes. And he said the first 2 lifetimes will be very difficult, full of suffering, because he has karma to pay off. And the 3rd lifetime will be very difficult up until the very end. And then he'll be free in God. So that's interesting and has a lot of implications in itself. But as to what I was saying before, if looking at that man's future incarnations, if he's having his first of those 3 and it's full of suffering and difficulty, he may not know that he's 2 incarnations away from freedom. Then the 2nd life, same as the first. Ugh. And then the 3rd life, difficult up to the end. Up to the end, but the end ends in God. Like that woman who was 80 years old, had been an atheist all her life, found Master and in his lifetime and focused on him and his teachings. And he said she was free at the end of life. So 79 years an atheist, although I don't know if she started at birth. And then last year, free. So if you can undergo such an extreme case, and knowing of these extreme cases, we can know, well, we are not those kinds of cases. We don't know what karma lies behind us and what troubles lie ahead. But in fact, Master said this to Swamiji. He said, remember, you must follow my will in all things, because I know what lies ahead for you, but you don't. And then Swamiji said, sir, do I follow your will? And Master said, you know my will in all the important things. So it was comforting, I'm sure, for Swamiji to hear that. And we saw the results of that played out in Swamiji's life. But I've talked about what brings us to the Guru. But then we have to remember that I talked about the confusion or the suffering that causes us to cry out for help. and to ask for help, and then to receive help. And though that is perhaps the moment that gets us onto the path, that begins the relationship with the Guru, then we have that experience sometimes every day after that. In other words, call on the Guru regularly, if not constantly. Sister Gyanamata, Master's most advanced woman disciple, said, we don't pray to Master enough. We don't ask for his help enough. He's right there, ready and willing, but he won't intrude. Sometimes he does give a little bit of a warning. Sometimes he acts through others. I had a very dramatic example of this in my life recently. I'm joking, it was not dramatic at all. But I was remembering that the ACs needed to be serviced and that their warranty was about to expire because we had purchased them about a year ago. And this was, of course, getting to the year anniversary of the center. And so I was trying to remember when we bought them, so I knew what date they would expire, but I wasn't very well, and I was sort of going in and out of my mind. And so I would remember, like at 3 a.m. when I was up in the middle of the night coughing, and then go, okay, but probably the center is closed right now, the service center. So then I would wake up, in the morning and then forget all about it and so on. But it was sort of lingering in my mind, and I was becoming a little more uneasy about it, because it's sort of like, well, I know we bought them in August, and there aren't that many days of August left, but I really should, time to go to bed. And so then a few mornings ago, the phone rang, and, hello, sir, Samsung. And I said, yes. He said, the warranty is expiring tomorrow. Why don't we service the ACs today while it's still free? And so I said, please, Vanga. And so what was so touching about that example, I mean, again, it's better to live an organized life with reminders, and you just make the darn phone call. It wasn't so hard. But for me, I just couldn't pull it together. And I got the call from them. And what was so sweet was that I hadn't prayed about it. Master, please help solve this AC date crisis. I mean, it wasn't that big a deal. And if I thought anyone was going to solve it, it was going to have to be me. But even then, the hand of the hand of God, the hand of God reached into my life and just bailed me out, you see? And so that is what we get in our lives, that the hand of the Guru bails us out. Remember, as Master said, God is the Guru. And he says in another talk, God sends the Guru. It's only God acting through the Guru, but we need that channel. We need someone to be able to guide us specifically. When I read Autobiography of a Yogi, I thought many of these truths I recognized. I had come to some of these same conclusions myself. But there were a whole lot of other things I had not come to yet, as I discovered. You can learn the laws of life from a book, from others. I thought, as I said earlier, you just stumbled across them because nobody really knows. Master knows, I discovered. But some of these things I don't know if I ever would have come up with, and especially Kriya Yoga. How would I have ever discovered Kriya Yoga on my own, meaning invented it, created it? Never. We need these things handed down to us from the avatars, from those who say, listen, you can spend a few yuga cycles in delusion or practice Kriya. So, your choice. So, let's take the airplane route to God to get out of it. So, the thing to remember then is that Master wants us to become strong. You could ask yourself, what is the purpose of the spiritual path? To someone who might not be interested in God. So you can't say, well, the spiritual path's goal is to merge with God. That's not a meaningful answer to someone who doesn't have that interest. And even if they do have that interest, what does it really mean? Samadhi, what does that mean? Being a jivan mukta. Well, what does that mean? It means never coming back again. Well, what does that mean? Well, I don't know. You see, it still is abstract. We know that finding God will mean, as Sri Yukteswarji said, the funeral of all sorrows. So we do know that it will be ananda, that it will be joyful, that it will be forever. But on a more sort of human level, or sort of easier to relate to level, the spiritual path's goal is to make you strong in yourself. So remember that. Master wants you to become strong. That means strong in will, and then also strong in love. Both sides. We have to be very disciplined, and in one sense very much like warriors, and on the other hand very soft. And we approach these from opposite directions. Some of us are more willful, so we have to become more soft. Others of us are too soft, you could say, in the sense that we also have to stand up for what is true, and we have to be willing to say, my life is for God. And so I will do all my other duties as needed, but I will remember my highest duty. And if there becomes a conflict, I will not compromise. I would rather let the world arrange itself around me, because this life is for God. If it's not, well, then the next life is for God. And the next life, and the next life. So that's fine. But think about how many lives we've already spent. I sometimes have this chilling thought, which I don't always share, but it strikes me when I have some new realization or discovery, and I think, oh, wow, isn't that wonderful? It's so true. This, whatever it is, that our life is for God, say, that's what it was. And then I think sometimes, what if I've had this discovery before in a past life and thought it was such a great discovery then, but somehow I've forgotten it. And now I'm here again thinking that this is my first time thinking it. In fact, how many lifetimes have I come to this same point? Thinking that I've accomplished something when it's just tirumba, back and back and back to the same point. And then that, instead of going, I think instead, okay, let's get out. Let's just get out. Let this be the lifetime that we get out. That's a good thing to think. If your mind automatically thinks, as mine sometimes does, yeah, but it might not be. Well, what's the alternative? Let us get as free as we can in this lifetime. Let us find God or die trying. Which means we will be as close as we could have gotten in this lifetime, as opposed to as far away. So, Master wants us to become strong. Remember, he says, you must stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And then the world we're in just trembles a little bit. Ah! He's saying, that's nothing. That's like a wiggling world. That's not the crash of a breaking world. We have to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking world. So remember, when your world is breaking, this is the time Master's talking about. You see, we can't just remember the philosophy when everything is beautiful. We have to cling to it, because it's for those emergencies that he's given it to us. And he's right there. He's absolutely right there. But we can turn our backs on him. I know for myself. As if we feel afraid, if we feel abandoned, he's right there. And we're saying, why am I all alone? And he's going. So cling to him. Even if you have to say, Master, I don't know which way is up. I don't know my left from my right. I don't know what to do in this situation. And I know my world is breaking. Still, cling to him. There is a picture of me that my mom loves to point out, much to my, well, it's not that embarrassing, but still, any picture of us that's like, kuti kuti is sometimes, I'm not kuti kuti anymore. But there's a picture of, it was my father and I at the zoo. And we were visiting the zoo. And so we were at in the lion area, and it was a big open area. There wasn't a cage for the lions, which was good. And so there was a big separation and so on. But the lion was on the other side, and the lion was looking right at me, thinking, just like, if I,
Snack.
Yeah, exactly. Snack, little, chaat masala or something would make it quite tasty. And so I was standing next to my father, and I was grabbing the edge of his pant leg. And so she really thinks that's adorable. But there's a teaching in that, which is that that's how we have to be with Master. Just when the lions are coming, just grab the edge of his robe or hold on to his hand. You don't stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds by being infinitely strong yourself. But you're with somebody who's infinitely strong. And do you think if you ask Master for protection that he won't offer it? Or that he'll say, that's fine, but you just have to please first give this little offering to me. I have a few requirements of my own. No, he's already accepted you as his child before you were even born. So cling to him in moments of darkness. Stand unshaken, because he is. Just imagine Master in this situation. Would he be broken by the situation? Never. And also, if it's easier, follow the life of Swamiji, the amount of adversity he faced, the challenges, and the great joys. And he was always centered throughout it, because he had Master with him. He knew it. And he showed us that example of discipleship. So, whether you're just beginning this path of discipleship, which also means, of course, resuming your discipleship from previous lives, or whether you've been on the path some time, it's important to remember that the tests on the path are subtle. Sometimes we get a big wallop, and so then it's easy to call out for God. As Haridas Ji says, sometimes Divine Mother grabs our finances because she knows she'll get our attention. So suddenly, okay, I'm praying with this. And so, but also, sometimes the tests come in subtler ways. When we first get onto the path, there's all this joy, this freedom, this relief that now I know where my home is, I know how to go forward, and that's all true. But then karma starts to creep in. Then the tests start to get bigger. Remember, part of accelerating our spiritual growth through meditation and Kriya means that we start skipping standards. We go from first standard to third standard. And so suddenly we find it's a little more difficult. And that I liked it before when I wasn't growing at all, because life was easy, as I sleepwalked, or whatever you do. Do you sleepwalked or sleptwalked? Anyway, you do something bad. Just through life, like this. Now that I'm growing faster, the tests are getting harder. Why is that? Because we are expanding our limits. But of course, to expand your limits, you have to overcome your current limits. So the more we expand, the greater we have to stretch. But what choice do we have? It's either stretch or shrink. And why not grow? So remember that test can creep in too. That where's the joy that I felt when I first came on the path? Where's all the relief and peace that I found? That this was going to be that which cured all suffering. It does cure all suffering in time. And it tells us that we are never alone. But it doesn't delete all bad karma and have us have only good karma. It isn't that life never has a challenge anymore. It's that we never have to face it alone anymore. So remember that when suddenly you find yourself that I used to get this thrill out of whatever it is, and now I'm just not getting that thrill. That is the sort of slogging middle ground, you could say, on the spiritual path. It is nothing wrong with Kriya, nothing wrong with Master, nothing wrong with the harmonium. It is just that we've come to a point where our heart is either dry or we've come up against a desire that we want, that's blocking it. Remember, Krishna says very compassionately, desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. So he's telling us, even the wise, not the liberated saints, because of course but those who are before that stage, even the wise, desire can obscure their wisdom. Their constant enemy it is. So if the wise have trouble, then it makes it okay. It's fine if we have a little bit of troubles with desires. It's fine. But remember, to overcome desires is not to not have them. We have desires. Let's face it. One man said to Swamiji, I want to live a spiritual life, but I also want designer clothes and a nice car and all these things. And Swamiji said, it's fine to want those things. you can want liberation and want those things. It may take you a little longer. And so the man said, oh, what are you saying? And I can have them, but it's going to take me a little longer to get free. And Swamiji said quite kindly, he said, but if you have these desires, why pretend that you don't? And it stopped the man in his, joking about the whole thing, because we have to take ourselves as we are. Remember, the Master takes us as we are. He accepted you as you are, knowing, perhaps, that unlike we may not have known that we were about to go through a big disaster in year 3 of discipleship, he knew, and he took us anyway. So if he can accept that, if he can accept us as we are, certainly we should be able to accept ourselves as we are, and also accept others. Remember, Master is working with them. Master is blessing them. Let us add our prayers and blessings and encouragement to them, even if they're bugging us. Say, if I'm being bugged, it's my fault. It's my problem. If you are exceptional at bugging, well, that is your special talent. But I'm not going to enter into it. I'm going to get to the point where it's Divine Mother through you going, and finally I realize the joke. And then I won't be bugged anymore. And then Divine Mother will say, okay, that's not working. How about this person? And then you'll go off and have a good time together. So remember that. We only draw strength through these tests and challenges. That's what's making us strong. So even if a desire comes and it feels that it has to be fulfilled, and you know in your heart it isn't actually right, remember what Master said, I don't ask that you overcome temptation, I ask that you resist it. And if you know it's something that you can't act on because it would just take your life in the wrong direction, then just give it to Him. And remember, so often these things come up. We really just want peace. And we think if this condition were removed in our life, we would have peace. Or we want joy, and we think if we got this thing, we would have joy. Or the other is that we want love. And so often we can mistake that love, as it says in the reading, the other reading, thinking that it's human love. But human love is a very poor and fleeting substitute. The love between two egos is nothing. It's only divine love that is we are actually seeking and what we actually want. And that therefore that human love will never satisfy. As Master said, human love reminds us of God's love. It draws us in the direction of divine love. It has that purpose. I'm not saying it's useless. But after a time it is useless. Because we found something greater. It doesn't make us less loving towards others. It makes us more loving. Because we're not also seeking that love back from them. I will give you all the love that I have, but I require at least 1 ounce of love back from you to nourish me. It won't be nourishing even if we get a whole bucket. It won't. So when we have that divine love in our hearts, which is the only permanency of love that there is, then we're not hungry anymore. Then we are fulfilled. And so then we aren't looking outside ourselves, and then we try to share that divine love with others, naturally. You'll do that even now. As you find more inner joy, as you find more peace, you will radiate that and others will pick up on that. But remember not to personalize it, because that love that you're experiencing is, as it says in the autobiography of a yogi, it is a love solitary because omnipresent. And what it's saying is it is the only love that exists. And so, because all of love is really only one, God's love, and that's why we must love only Him. God bless you.
So we are going to have a discipleship ceremony, and before we do the arati, before we have you come up, I just wanted to also make a comment that the discipleship ceremony, of course, is for our new disciples. And we had one of the disciples had their ceremony last Thursday. So we have 3 others who are taking their blessed vows today. And we offer our support and love to you all who are taking this step. And remember that this is probably not the first time you've taken discipleship with Master. If you feel he's your Satguru, which taking this vow implies, then your Satguru has been with you for lifetimes. And so you are just reaffirming that vow today. And for all of us who have taken the discipleship vow before, we can keep in mind that we remember how it was for us when we first, in this lifetime, retook that vow, I'll say, and how new everything felt, and how inspiring everything felt, especially in the beginning. And it's an interesting thing that happens. The longer we're on the path, the more immersed we are, and the less odd being devoted to Master feels. You know, the less odd it feels to talk about God all the time, or the less odd it feels to offer things up to God in a way. It becomes a natural thing. But when something becomes natural and automatic, there's also that ability to kind of lose being in the present with it. We can often slip into old behaviors we had even before we were disciples. If we were nervous people who had a lot of agitation, we might have taken the vow and then taken Kriya and had this sudden calmness come into our life. But as that newness wears away, we might go back into this nervous habit or this restlessness that we had before. So as we have this vow today, remember to reaffirm that we are moving farther and farther away from restlessness and nervousness. We have to. And to not take it for granted that when we are doing these techniques, when we are doing this path, the purpose is to remove that restlessness. The purpose is to bring more calmness into life. Whenever we have a ceremony, it becomes easy to do the ceremony, and then after the ceremony, just life is normal again. And it's like, what happened? What happened? We just had this very sacred moment, and we just start chattering and, you know? And I'm not saying this as a chastisement. I'm saying this just as encouragement to nurture that calmness within and to be present with it, so that when we have, you know, every day should be sacred for us. Every day we should feel that sacredness in our life. Every day we should honor that calmness and try not to go into that nervousness, because we affect everyone around us too, and we're like this, and other people are trying to be calm. So just keep that in mind, that, okay, maybe I've had the vow for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, but I'm going to reaffirm today with this vow of discipleship to bring more calmness into my life. And then also that love that Dharmarajan was talking about. When we get on the path, our heart opens. And very often we find ourselves, at least I used to, I don't anymore, but falling in love with others because their heart is open too. And you mistake that love from others or your own love as some personal thing. But what's actually happening is we're loving God coming through that person. And some people will ruin their lives because of that love. They'll have an affair, or they'll mistakenly start pursuing someone, and that someone has a family or, you know, loved ones. Don't do it, you know. If you're not finding love in your life with your own partner, then you need to give that love to God only and not try and seek it from someone else. That's a big mistake we make on this path. And it's very important. If you're single, that's different. You're probably looking for love. But if you're married, you need to honor those vows. And so that love that you might mistake for coming through someone is just a male-female thing you might be feeling, or you're feeling the love of God. And because we're all seeking that love in a deep way, when it comes to us through someone, we think, oh, here's the love I've been waiting for. But in actuality, it's the love within us that's been awakened, and we mistake it for coming from that person. And so, and that's what happens. It's interesting when someone doesn't return the love we feel we should have back. Isn't it interesting that we can get mad about it? That's so funny because it's just the opposite of love. So just be very careful that always remember that the love we are seeking is coming from the Guru, is coming from Master. If we went up to Swamiji with our energy wrong, hello, Swamiji, he would go, and then maybe someone was over here, and you'd kind of be going, what did I do wrong again? I remember when I was brand new on the path, maybe it was a few years, but it doesn't matter. And he was coming out with the new path. So this was in the early 90s or something like that. And so I was in line and I was going to get my new path signed. And I was like, okay, I got to think of something good to say. And so I brought the book up to him and I said, Swami, I'm sure that Master is very pleased with you. And he just looked at me like, just like, I'm not giving you any energy for that. Not like, oh, you're a new person, I'll make you feel better. Oh, hello, your name's Dharmini or Stephanie at the time. You're this person, No. He wasn't about just doing things just because it's polite. He was about doing things because it was right. So what he did for me was right. And whenever I came to him agitated or nervous, he just turned his head. And so I'm not suggesting that we all turn our heads to each other. This is spiritual community. But really, we should be aware when we're approaching someone with that nervous energy. And we should also be aware that people might approach us with that nervous energy. And when they do, feel free to smile and, oh, I have something over here I have to do. It's okay. Because there's a lot of new people here. And there's always going to be new people coming in. And the newer we are, with the less meditation under our belt, the more nervous and things we can be. However, people after even 10 years on the path can be very agitated and nervous all the time too. So it's not a natural thing unless you put your energy into that, unless you really work on being more calm, work on being more aware, that kind of a thing. So take this discipleship vow today as a renewal towards calmness, as a renewal towards peace. Remember the basic concepts of what meditation brings us: calmness, peace, divine love, wisdom, Om, the sense of power. These are beautiful presences of God. This is what we're here for, to feel the presence of God. God bless you.